So hello everyone, and welcome to this session on Form Conversion Analytics Power-Ups. What am I going to be covering today? Well, let's have a look. First thing I'm going to be talking about today is the need to have a health check on your website. One of the most fundamental problems that plagues almost every Google Analytics setup, and this is true for other analytics software as well, is that most people trust the data that's coming out of these packages. But what happens if they're collecting the wrong stuff? What happens if your setup is broken? What happens if the figures that you think are correct on the screen are calculated in a different way from what you understood? The health check is all about this and making sure that the foundations of your analytics that you're going to use for conversion optimization are not flawed themselves. I'm going to talk about things like enhanced e-commerce in Google Analytics, cool stuff like step drop diagrams, manual funnels and ring models. I'm also going to talk a bit about form analytics and the kind of stuff that you can do using packages or out the box solutions with Google Analytics by implementing a little bit of code. And then some things about additional insights. You know, when you're optimizing forms, what you're looking for is every bit of information that can help you remove defects, improve UX, reduce friction, improve persuasion, and ultimately the speed, happiness, and success rate that people get when they're moving through these forms. And most importantly, don't forget, this is what you're doing here. You're replacing a nice, friendly salesperson in John Lewis with an unfriendly, robotic, programmatic system that's trying to resolve problems in their input into the forms. Now, if you write this in a programmatic kind of way, it will be devoid of emotion. It's like putting a robot in place of that salesperson in John Lewis. It's just not going to work. So you have to work phenomenally hard to optimize forms, and it's not just about the analytics. They'll tell you how big and where the problems are, but it won't tell you why. And you can guess as much as you like, and guessing is fine up to a point, but the real source of inspiration for running any A/B test or optimizing a form is knowledge about what problems the users are hitting. And this is where my analytics world intersects with what we're talking about here. So, number one, the first problem, your analytics setup is a sewer. And imagine if you went to a new job and on your first day you walked into the office and there was 3 foot of poo and everyone was standing around in the poo drinking cups of tea and chatting to each other and having a great time. And you're like, well, this is really weird. Why is everyone doing this? I mean, why would people stand around in this stuff all day long? And, you know, people will come up to you and you say, well, this is a bit odd. Why are we all standing around in this pool all day long? And they say, oh, it's not too bad. You kind of get used to the smell in the end. You know, it's not a problem. And this is what a lot of people are doing with their analytics setups. They're simply not showing the correct data because nobody's bothered to actually line up whether the stuff that they collect and present in the interfaces is actually a reflection of reality. Most important thing that you can do here is get a health check today. Get someone to audit your setup to check the collection and reporting to make sure that the stuff you see is actually being calculated, derived and summarized in the right ways. Are you getting truth and clarity here, or are you just getting lies and noise? Can you actually ask the right questions? The stuff that you're trying to optimize in your forms, do you have the data instrumented to be able to do this? This stuff, getting the basics right in your analytics setup, is probably about the best value activity you're going to pay for this year. So ask these people: Charles Meaden, Fast Bloke from Conversion World, Dan Barker, ask me as well. You know, if you want someone to come and do one of these audits, they usually take 1 to 2 days, pretty cheap, and these guys will actually give your developers explicit instructions on what code to change and which pages. It's not a report saying, hey, your analytics is busted, ha ha ha, isn't that funny? No, it's a report that shows you the precise steps that you need to implement in order to correct the problem and make it go away. And that's far better than you're going to get from anybody reviewing your analytics setup or advising you on the strategy of your analytics. Get this stuff in first, because basically without this foundation all your reports are bullshit. All of you are standing around having nice conversations about stuff that you're doing on the site, and all of you are completely wrong and you're just standing around and poo. Stop doing it. Get your analytics fixed, and if you don't know whether they're broken or not, well, that's kind of part of the problem. You know, it's like tills not adding up. And this is where this comes in. You know, imagine running a business with tills where the tills didn't categorize goods properly, or the figures that were given to management did not include the money given out in refunds to customers, or the sales of gift vouchers, or where staff were paid lunch money out of the till, or where expenses were paid. All of this stuff is kind of handled pretty well in tills, and the information from the tills is collected in such a way that it feeds into a store-based management information system and a BI system at head office where all this data flows. But note, the important thing is they've got the collection right at the till level, at the point of interaction with the customer. So this is a ground-up approach. Now, if your tills are broken and they don't add up correctly at the end of the day, and you can't account for how much cash is in the drawer and how much you're supposed to have taken from customers, well, you know what's going to happen if you run a retail store. You're either going to be thieved, or you're going to make bad business decisions, or both are going to happen, and you're going to be completely unaware that it's going on. So tills are a very good analogy here. You wouldn't run a retail business without knowing absolutely that the tills were precise and collecting the right information that fed into all the systems that you use. It would be very dumb. Same is true of a car. You know, if you drive around your car and you've got a wonky fuel gauge, you're going to know it. You're going to run out. You're going to get into all sorts of problems. Same with your speedo. If it isn't working, you're going to get flashed loads of times, and you're going to get loads of points in your license. And if you're running a large e-commerce site, you're probably investing the kind of costs that would typically be required to run you know, a swing wing fighter, right? So a fighter jet, and you're spending all this money to keep your product, this thing, in the air. Well, you're not going to run this with Mickey Mouse electronics and instrumentation systems, you know, otherwise the thing is going to crash and you're going to lose it. You know, you've got to really think of your business as an asset like this. If you're actually going to fly this plane and do it safely and do it to ultimate performance, then you're going to need the right instrumentation and monitoring tools. And this is what these guys have. I mean, go and talk to someone who's an F1 enthusiast and ask them what life would be like without data, telemetry on the cars, information about the cornering, the G-forces, the fuel intake. There's a huge amount of information about the performance of these engines when exposed to the track conditions that these guys are using for competitive advantage. And when your margins are tiny, when the other guy's got a car almost as good as yours and maybe a slightly different configuration, you're looking for hundreds of tiny little things that will shave time off you know, your track, your lap time. And without that data, these guys are toast. I mean, can you imagine them just saying, well, we kind of used the out-the-box Ferrari system, we haven't tuned it, and no one's really checked it, and yeah, we kind of run the data from there. These guys are obsessed about this kind of thing, making sure they're collecting the right data, and this is why you know, teams of these people are used to being in a competitive situation and winning races. There's a good lesson to be learnt from that. So, next thing. Enable enhanced e-commerce on your setup, your GA setup. If you've got it, you can start to get wonderful diagrams like these that essentially show the step drop that you have in a process or a number of layers in a website. There's a bit more explanation on this article in the link below. A good word for step drop diagrams here. These are incredibly useful. I think when you look at funnels, one of the easiest ways of working out what's going on or where the blockages are in the pipe work is to actually compare the drop at each step and to be able to segment those. This is one of the most important things, particularly if you have different types of intent or persona groups or marketing sources that are traversing that funnel. They're going to react to that funnel in slightly different ways. And if you're not able to segment the step drop data, well, you're running on averages, and averages are generally a lie that you must try and avoid. You know, average this, average that, average e-commerce conversion rate, meh. Really important to have these kind of diagrams for A/B testing funnels. I've been through the pain and anguish of implementing funnels that did not perform, and it was because of a simple mistake made somewhere in the funnel that led to a bigger drop-off than we had in the old funnel. And what happens is these things cancel out. So you look and you say, well, the old funnel got a 20% conversion rate through the funnel, and the new funnel does the same. Wow, oh, it just hasn't really changed things. Well, it did. It's just that you didn't realize that you've changed the place where people drop off from one step to another. You know, you've created a new problem while solving all the old ones, and therefore you've cancelled them out. This is another example of averages lying to you. One really important thing, and it's a feature I played around with in Google Analytics, it's in beta, is the ability to create funnels, and in this particular case it's on-the-fly funnels that apply to historical data. But one of the interesting things about that feature is it allows you to choose between users and sessions for building your funnel models. Now, most people are used to a session-based model, and what happens here, if you have a funnel that has 5 steps, but people frequently come back to steps 1 and 2, maybe because you don't save their data, you time them out, you force them to fill out all the same form fields over again, even if they go away for a 5-minute coffee break. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to overcount the number of users that are actually at the start of that funnel, because you're counting the sessions that arrived. Now, if people are taking 3, 4 or 5 attempts to get through a funnel and are filling information out and starting from the start each time, then what you'll see is a massive inflation at the neck, the top of the funnel, inflation at the neck of the funnel, and that will basically be the overcount in the repeat visits. So if you're making funnels, make sure you understand whether you're looking at a session-based model or a user-based model. The beauty of user-based ones is that you don't then overcount those people who are coming back in. I would look at both because they tell you interesting differences about behavior with the funnel. So how do I get step drop diagrams? Well, they're already in enhanced e-commerce, and there's this new feature coming to Google Analytics. Let me know when it's live, guys. What about making manual models though? Well, you can make a custom report here with pages and user counts and filter the page or page groups that you count as a step. So you can go, okay, how many users saw step 3 of the funnel? How many users saw as far as step 4? How many users saw the payment page? How many users saw the success page? You can count these numbers up and then build yourselves a manual model, and this applies to Google Analytics configurations that are broken. Maybe the goal configurations are a bit too loose, maybe the funnel steps are too loose. Either way, even if you have no goals set up on Google Analytics, you can still use this manual model to hack some rough data out of GA about what's happening and make your own step drop model. There's no excuse. If the report doesn't exist, get the data and make it yourself. Tell you, very illuminating things. And one of the things that you can do in enhanced e-commerce but also build using these manual models is a ring model. So in an e-commerce site, how many actually execute a search or look at a category page? How many can I get to a list page, a product page? How many of those then add to basket? How many of those view the basket and start the checkout process, and so on? And by building a ring model of your site, either for all customers or for particular intent groupings or flows, then you can actually understand where they are shedding traffic, and you can concentrate your CRO efforts in those areas where there's an obvious leakage, and you can see an obvious problem that can be fixed, and you have strong other evidence to support the hypothesis that you have for shifting behavior at that point. but there's nothing better than a diagram to actually show you where the problem might be. And when I've created these ring models, they frequently showed things like, well, it's great, you know, we get loads of people viewing products, but hardly anybody actually adds to basket. That might be because the button's actually beneath the page fold and it's a color that makes it recessive in the page hierarchy. So anyway, that's an interesting example of how these can help you narrow down a problem and cut the focus of all your CRO efforts into particular areas where you're going to see the biggest benefit from that shift in behavior. So you can make a simple step drop diagram. Here's a kind of example here. You put a formula in this right hand column and then you can basically work out, well, you know, this is a kind of pretty hellish drop at the first step. You know, if I was going to start anywhere, I'd be trying to work on step 3 or step 1. I certainly wouldn't concentrate my efforts if I had to make a choice on step 2 as my starting place. And you know, you can basically pull all this data out of user reports. You put in, let's say you're looking for a number of people who got to the thank you page, and you can pull them out in this GA template and then count up the unique users. So some options here for step drops. You can use manual models like I've described, enhanced e-commerce. You can create your own kind of layer of step drop, or the kind of progress rate that people take through different steps and forms through event tracking. There are some cool tools here that will also help you. Heap Analytics for doing retrospective work, Formissimo for form stuff, Hotjar, which comes with a whole heap of features including session replay, voice of customer tools, and analytics stuff. You can also use the Google API with Google Sheets. So you can create a simple spreadsheet or a set of values that queries your Google Analytics setup and then puts that data into a nice Excel sheet for you. So rather than having somebody download GA data and then take it and put it into Excel, you can get a Google Sheets report to pull data from the API and then save it to a file. So rather than you making the Excel, you can get Google Sheets and the Google API to do the heavy lifting for you. Again, this can be a real help here for pulling out quick models, but it's also very useful for any general reporting. Automate this crap so you don't have to do it every week, please. Power Pivot's a pretty cool tool. Carmen Marderos and I played around with segmentable ring models, and that's a pretty cool way of downloading a pivot table for a series of steps or a checkout process or a form, a multi-step form, and that will allow you then to play around with the data cube in essence there and have a look at the different segments that actually apply to the step drop rates. Very, very clever stuff, lots of fun. And last but not least, those Google on the fly reports, which are pretty cool. I wish I had them in mine. So a little bit about event tracking. We've gone from a universe in which really the world of the web was a series of really boring pages with hyperlinks embedded in them, and a kind of analytics setup that often harks back to that. Now, people don't traverse pages like this anymore. They actually have excuse me, they have a heap of interactions. So they'll interact with a field. They might go to a product page and choose a size, play with the pictures, see if something's in stock, add it to their wish list. There may be, in some complex web applications or websites, enough interactions to keep somebody on a page for minutes, hours even. So you can't think of the world in pages anymore. Pages are just a holding container for a set of interactions that people can have with your product, and you need to capture these individually. So the layer of people's behavior is not page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. It's actually about the points that they reach, the things that they interact with, whether they're successful or they fail in those interactions, and what those interactions tell us about the quality of the experience. Really careful thought about how you set up your event tracking on your site will actually revolutionize the way that you look at pages. So rather than me wondering, Well, which pages drove people to the funnel in a lead generation site? Let's choose an insurance example. So let's say I know that there are 5 pages that drove most of the traffic into the top of the funnel for this insurance website. And I then look at those pages and, you know, I can't necessarily tell which thing they clicked on there. Did they click on the call to action at the top of the page, the middle, or the bottom of the page? Did they click on the header or the footer? Actually, I'm not really interested that it came from that page. What I'm more interested in is what was the graphical element, call to action, button, hyperlink that they clicked on that page. So it's not enough to know that most of the people came into my funnel from those 5 pages. I need to know what were the creative elements on those pages that they interacted with that then led them to the page. So this is a new layer. It's actually the persuasion layer, or what's actually working on people that you're analyzing in your analytics data. It's a big change, but it's an important one. Think interactions. So if you're going to fire events inside a form to collect your own data in Google Analytics, and it's pretty easy, the most important thing to capture is, did somebody interact with the first field in the form? If they simply came into the page, had a look around, didn't do anything and left, that's a very different intent classification from people who have actually started to fill out the form and shown some really clear intent that they want to get through it. So what you can do here is you can set up Google Events to fire, for example, on blur of a field. So when people lose focus to move to another field. And this way you can see whether someone filled in field A, whether they moved to field B, whether they got to field C. So you can actually see the progress. How far did they get down the form? Did they interact with this field halfway down the form first? Why? Why did they not start at the top of the form? So you get to understand the interactions that people have with the form, which fields they fill out first, how long they take on those fields. And really, you should be thinking of these forms a bit like the way I described event tracking. Forms are a series of interactions. They're little nuggets of information that the user has to provide. They may be broken into little sections. Each form may be a series of set interactions or groups of questions that should really be considered as steps on their own. For example, a one-step checkout is not one step in my view. It might be a series of 14 interactions sort of chain linked together, and I need to break my analytics up. My checkout page might be on one page, but my analytics should be showing the 14 steps, you know, not this is how many people came to the checkout page. Not very useful. You know, concentrate really here not on over instrumenting stuff in the forms. I would concentrate if you can get away with the bare minimum, which is really the key steps that people reach. So not necessarily every field. If you can't get away with that, then concentrate on the gnarly data or interaction. So where there might be a pause, or the information is more difficult, or it represents a natural break in the kind of clumps of fields or groups of information that you're asking for within the form, and come to see these as steps themselves. You know, it's not enough to think, oh, we've got step 1, 2, 3, 4. Actually, these micro steps of, you know, showing engagement as people make their way through the form. And if you don't know where they're dropping off, you know, they're not dropping off at the page, they're dropping off somewhere on the form, which is the field, the interaction, the bit of information that you asked for that drove them away from the page. That's vital knowledge. You're sending people out of the store onto the street. You need to know what you're doing. And you need to sweat the tiny details here. Absolutely everyone, down to every form interaction, validation of fields, error message, feedback, help text, every single tiny little detail. And optimizing single fields here is very, very worthwhile, as I'll show in the next example. So when we optimize postcodes at LoveFilm, I spent a couple of days looking at the kind of stuff that people typed in. And I figured out in the end that there were some patterns where we were rejecting people's postcodes, because I looked at all the failures. You know, how could we improve our postcode lookup kind of hit rate, as it were? And I found a number of things in our validation where we were rejecting dumb things. For example, if they put 2 spaces in the postcode, we would say, oh, it's not a proper postcode. It is. You can work it out. I mean, gosh, you know, these are computers, you know. We can do cool and clever stuff. But I found some more esoteric things, so people choosing O's rather than zeros and zeros rather than O's, and the same with ones and L's. So all the stuff in this left hand column here, you know, that's the real postcode at the top, but all the other entries would actually get rejected, even though programmatically we can actually work out exactly what the user meant. This is like Google saying, do you know what? I know that you can't type, but actually I'm showing you what I pretty much know you are searching for. It works pretty well, doesn't it? You probably don't even notice it. Exactly my point. Second column and third column show again some other examples, but this one on the right is a really interesting one. Why are we getting shifted number symbols actually inside the postcode? And the reason is that people aren't touch typists like most of you listening to this screencast. They actually tend to type the postcode as they would write it, which is actually in capital letters. And what they're doing is they're looking down at the keyboard as they're doing it, not what their typing output is on the screen. So they end up putting this stuff in. It's a small amount of people, but see if you take all these validation routines and rules and put them together in a wrapper and stop rejecting people's inputs and start fixing it instead. And all of this led to really clean data. We just said, yeah, here's your address. And they didn't need to know that they'd put the wrong postcode in. We fixed it for them. Okay, it's called invisible UX. But fixing this one field for a delivery service or anything that needs to come to someone's address, if you fail to get a really high success rate on this lookup and you don't have fallback mechanisms for handling manual addresses or ones that maybe aren't in the postcode database yet, then you're going to suffer in conversion terms. If you're trying to deliver Shizzle to people's houses, but you don't enable 100% of people who want Shizzle to be delivered to get it because you can't be bothered to optimize your postcode lookup, then you'll lose money. Love Film got an extra 2.5% conversion for changing one field. Yes, it was about a day and a half, 2 days work, worth every penny. Anyway, some interesting information on outcodes and encodes if you're doing postcode optimization. That will pretty much show to you how you can work out what the user means even if they can't type. You should also be challenging conventions here with form optimization. I think a lot of us suffer from this. I've done it as well. You know, you can get used to seeing certain patterns and you think they're okay, but you're thinking from your point of view, or you're thinking that they're acceptable and that they still make sense in this day and age. And the problem here is having a nice sort of set of drop downs for a date of birth might have worked 10 years ago, but in this web right now it's a pain in the ass for you to fill out if you're on a mobile device or you're on a tablet, because you have to tap the little control, then you have to scroll down, and then you have to tap at the end, and then you have to tap the done button. And you're making all these interactions that are really complex and time consuming, and actually it's a simple piece of information. I know this stuff. I know what my birth date is. And then the worst insult is the older you get, the more time on mobile you spend scrolling down to your date of birth, because it's always down the bloody bottom. So every year I'm made to spend more and more seconds, like about a second for every year that I've been born, filling out bloody year drop downs. It's just ridiculous. Gov.uk are doing some fantastic UX work, and they tested all these different date drop down formats, and they really suck, especially on tablets and mobiles. Empty number spaces like this work much better. Give them an example, give them a little bit of code help. It's harder to code. Oh dear, you know, it's worth the sweat. This is the small stuff. These are the details that you have to sweat to get maximum conversion out of forms. Another thing, errors. You might sweat a lot over the error messages that you throw to people, or the style of errors that you actually generate on the page, how you're going to highlight the field, how you're going to give them information on how to correct the error. But I can tell you now, from looking at analytics data on loads of sites, errors in forms are the single highest correlation with form abandonment. So you get an error, you're many more times likely to abandon the form than somebody who does not get an error at all, right? This tells me clearly that what you have to do is avoid errors and practice defensive web design. So avoiding errors through, smart validation or giving inline validation is really important. Using autocorrect, typing in a location, maybe using Google's Map API to pull up matches is better than running your own search system. Use some kind of autocorrect or auto lookup functionality, and use smart and not evil validation. Also, smart defaults. If somebody puts in their zip code in America, then why are you asking them to choose their state from a list of states? I mean, that's just evil. You're just saying, we can't be bothered, we're going to push the complexity of filling out this form across the table to you, dear user. I mean, why can't you just do smart things that say, okay, that zip code's in Texas. Cool, we'll default the state to Texas, and then that's a little bit less work to do for the user. And the user goes, oh, that's nice, I didn't need to fill out the state. It knew. Amazing. And those kind of little tiny details will actually make people feel happy. You're just taking a little bit of pain that they were expecting out of their life. So collect when errors happen in Google Analytics and manage this stuff out. Please don't just think about persuasion or slapping stuff on the forms. Manage out errors, because these are the cause of exits in a great deal of sites. Great one on phone validation. I looked at all phone number formats around the world in every territory that we worked with for Belron, including some places that we serviced with tiny islands, and I looked at all the phone number formats and I thought to myself, what's the best phone number format that we can come up with here? What's the best rule that I can come up with to kind of internationalize and standardize phone numbers? And actually, from talking to the customer services guys, they know what all the numbers are. They don't really need any special formatting or advice. They can pretty much work it out. And so really the rule ended up being that as long as the phone number contained 8 numeric characters or more, it was good enough, right? And we implemented that. It's been done worldwide. These guys have a turnover of several billion pounds, and it's not caused them any problems anywhere, right? Because people can work out phone numbers. It's designers and coders who actually come up with these complex rules about how phone numbers should actually be validated, and what they do is they just piss people off and they make them leave your form, right? You have to make a choice. Do you want to make people jump through hoops in terms of precisely formatting the data, or would you like to actually make some money for them? Decide today, please. So there's a slide deck on here that's got some really useful information in here, and these two guys, Tim LB, Tim Leighton Boyce and Charles Meaden, are very worth following on this topic or going to see at MeasureCamp. Check them out. There's one guy, if you have not heard of this guy and you're working on forums, oh boy, is this going to make your life better. If you don't feel that your life has not been made better after reading his stuff on forums, then please email me and explain why, because I sure as hell will be mystified. He is the best guy on the planet for forums, and he's the guy who coined the whole phrase mobile first. So there's only one book that's ever really been written about forms that's decent, and his book, Filling in the Blanks, is the only book on forms design, psychology, conversion and data. The guy's not full of bullshit. He's used eye tracking, user testing, A/B testing, analytics data to inform his work, and he knows this stuff, right? He really does, and he's pretty active in the developer community, but he's also one of the world's leading experts on UX, and in particular he's probably the top guy in mobile forums around in my book. If you are doing cross-device design, this guy is a motherload of useful information and successful patterns. He's got a whole load of how-to videos on YouTube. There's no excuse. Go and read his stuff. He gives away everything for free. Enjoy. Number 7, testing your shizzle with people. It's really, really important to do this, and It's not complicated, and these days a huge proportion of your audience isn't tethered to a desktop computer in the house. They're at a bar near you, they're down the street, they're in a coffee shop, they're hanging out at some office space near you. I've never had a problem finding people in the target audience that I can interact with, particularly in consumer driven applications. So there's no excuse now. You can go out and do guerrilla testing with these people. You don't have to have an expensive lab set up, and there are many ways to achieve this. You can also use the fact that you have traffic coming to your site, so you can actually apply to panels, panel services like user testing and user analytics, and they will pull people in and they will run them through a script, and they will do some user testing or give you some feedback on a new page or some functionality on your site, and it's great. There's only one drawback though, okay? There's no moderator, so you can't ask them questions about stuff that they're having problems with, and you know that lack of moderation is the downside of this remote stuff. And the other problem here is panels. You tend to get a lot of professional testers. It's a bit like, you know, if you went and volunteered yourself as a drug guinea pig with like 20 different drugs, it's going to ruin all those trials. And I think this is also what happens here. You tend to end up with people who end up being professional testers testing your website, rather than people who are, you know, kind of better representations or unbiased representations of your target audience. So always be very careful if you're using panels that you should screen out people that have so that you don't look at anyone who's been involved in this kind of research for at least 6 months, if not a year. You know, just don't get people who are doing it all the time, because it's not good. And one of the best ways to completely avoid this is to actually use these tools to recruit people who come to your site. Yes, you can use the traffic coming to your site every day and play with them and do stuff. So it's perfectly possible to offer people an incentive to actually give you some feedback on the site, and usually people are very happy to do it. So you can use some of these tools to actually do site recruitment and pre-screen people, get the right people in, brief them on a test, run the test, sort out their incentive, and it can be an awful lot cheaper than doing this with a testing panel or a lab. These tools at the bottom here are pretty good for doing sort of like smaller scale verification of stuff like prototypes and mock-ups. I'd also add InVision to that list, simply because they've got an amazing prototyping tool that you should check out. Really important thing here is making sure that if you're going to do any usability testing and go out and capture this kind of stuff, that you've got a recording of it you can take back and share with the team that didn't come with you. And all these tools will kind of turn your laptop or mobile into a mobile usability lab. So with these tools at the top for your laptop device, with a webcam, you can basically turn any laptop into a portable usability lab, capture the screen and a picture of the user's face, the audio of you talking to them, their responses, the whole thing wrapped into a video, just like a professional usability lab. These tools at the bottom are really ways of capturing mobile users. One is by using UX Recorder, which will record browser sessions only, not apps. Skype hugging is a cool thing, where you use a Skype call to record somebody showing their mobile phone on their webcam by putting their arms around the back of the laptop. A little bit complicated, check out the article, but it's neat, it works. And last but not least, AirPlay mirroring, where you can have somebody play around on a mobile or a tablet and then have that screen casted to another another iOS device in another room. So it's really handy if you then want to be able to record that stuff and splice audio in. So there's all sorts of different tools and techniques that you can use here to get this stuff. This one's also really important. Probably 20 million quid's worth of stuff I've found within the last couple of years that nobody knew about, no customers ever complained about them, yet these were massive browser bugs and holes in somebody's website. if you have not segmented your funnels or key steps in the process to see how different desktop browsers, how different mobile devices, how different tablets are proceeding through the funnel, then you may be missing a source of where there's a problem here. Either way, you got to test this stuff, and if you're doing browser testing, here's a whole bunch of resources for testing, you know, Firefox and Internet Explorer and everything else. Make sure you run the analytics to work out who is actually using what browser on your site, and then make your testing list accordingly. Don't do it by market stats. Figure out what your customers are using and then test with that. That's the important thing. And for mobile, this service appthwack.com and also deviceanywhere.com are fantastic because they allow you to rent a mobile device by the hour and actually run stuff on it. And it's a real mobile device in a cabinet in the cloud on the internet. So you can rent out a phone in California if you like and install apps on it and play with it and make calls and do everything else. These are fantastic tools and they help you QA and fix defects in your products. So go looking in the analytics, but most importantly, test this shizzle with what people have in their hand when they come to your site, not your imaginary idea of what people use or what's popular in the market. Find out what your customers have, not someone else's, and test with that. And don't try and test everything. I'd rather have a thorough test on 85-90% of the browsers out there than a perfect test sort of on 99%. It's just, you know, get it done, make it lean, make it work, fix defects, keep fixing them. Session replay is another vital tool for analytics and insight into your funnels or forms, and it fills in a missing link here. You know, I could have usability tested the postcode lookup for LoveFilm and discovered with 5 to 8 people that the postcode lookup worked fine. But actually what I'm testing there is the postcode lookup UI, and it seems to work okay. That's great. The usability test tells me that. What it doesn't tell me though is how well the postcode lookup actually works when exposed to the kind of data that the public are going to fill into it when I make it live. That's a different question. And actually being able to see people using stuff that you've just published live, or see people using stuff that you put into A/B tests, or even if you're looking at an existing funnel or a landing page, you can actually see what people are doing, where they're clicking, what kind of error messages they're getting, where they're stuck. And you can actually even see emotion when it gets expressed, particularly anger, you know, people moving the mouse around. There's a lot more rich information from watching these videos than you'll typically get from analytics data. It's not quite a usability test because you can't ask them. It's not quite analytics data, but it's somewhere in between, and it bridges those quant call worlds. Hotjar's got some really cool features in it: recordings, voice of customer, polls, feedback, and form analytics. Decibel Insight, Inspectlet, Clicktail all make very, very good tools that have got various features. There are some additional ones on here. I know a few people that use Mouseflow and rate it, but check them all out. These should be easy to implement. Some of them are not, so ask me if you have any questions about this kind of stuff. But if you put something like Hotjar on your site, you know, within minutes you can actually be seeing what's actually happening on the forums, and you were blind before. These are great tools and vital for optimizers. If you don't have them, you're missing out. But most of all with this stuff, please don't panic. I've made a lot of it sound hard and gnarly and complicated. The main thing is you've got to know where people are actually dropping out of forms. And in some cases it might be page level that you're broadly looking at, but in most cases you really need to know what's happening at the kind of field level, or the groups of fields that make up your forms. It's not tough to get this done. You just got to work at it over a period of time, and if you continually improve it, you're writing a love note to yourself in the future. You're saying, dear me, I just thought I'd improve all this analytics data so that you're sitting now in the future sometime having a great time getting some amazing insights out of your site, and you'll be there in the future thinking, that was a great thing that I did for myself. You know, I've done it several times, and I've discovered months later that it was the best thing that I ever did with these setups. Start somewhere, get a health check, start instrumenting, and start finding out. It's not conjecture about forms, and it's not just working the numbers, it's actually finding out what's going wrong with the users. The numbers help you there, they're not the whole picture. You need qual and quant here. So, summary, get your analytics health checked, build accurate models for your forms, double, triple check them. Track events and interaction layers, not pages, and optimize field interactions, not whole forms, not just the whole forms. Track all the errors here that you can find and possibly trap, and design specifically to avoid them. Start with the ones that happen most often, or start with the ones that seem to be most avoidable and easy to fix. Read absolutely everything and watch everything by look. Test your Shizzle with real people and real devices. Amazing, it will focus you on fixing stuff that you don't know is broken. Get a session replay and form analytics set up, and always bed in new funnels by A/B testing them. This means that you can compare the old and the new. You might find that actually the best funnel is the early part of your old funnel and the latter part of your new funnel. You just will not figure that out unless you A/B test them and compare the step drop side by side. It may sound tricky, it's really not hard, and it will change your life in terms of how you actually design those products, because you'll waste an awful lot less development time trying to get it right again and again and again. Okay, if you want to get it right first time or with the minimum amount of iterations, then start getting with data and insight into your forms design process. Don't just overhaul it. Do your research and your work and your insight and get the analytics data and then think about it. That's the right way to approach it. And really invest in this stuff. You know, if you're putting money into your form analytics, you're going to get a payback. Same as if you actually invest in tills in a retail store rather than having bits of paper to count up the money. It's going to make business a whole load more efficient. And that's what you're looking for here. And anyone who thinks that Google Analytics or any other tool is just, well, it works out the box, doesn't it? No, you've got to invest in it. Like that Formula One team, their investment in analytics is their competitive advantage. It is their intellectual property. It is an essential part of the work and everything they do. It's how they win. It's how they work out why they lost. And it dominates the data-driven thinking of everyone on the team every day. This is where you got to look forward to and strive to get there step by step. I hope this stuff was useful for you today, and I'm just going to wrap up with some top form mistakes that I don't want you to be making. So, biggest mistakes on forms. If you don't know the user, number one commandment, know thy user. Not understanding the person who's on the site, their device, their context, their level of urgency, and the tasks or goals that you want to achieve. And certainly it's great to follow the device here, and I always look at device splits and analytics, but you've got to follow the user too, and that means thinking about people at a user level and authenticating them, not necessarily following them just at a device level. Do both. Second biggest problem, progress and feedback. You know, not telling people what happens next. You know, will someone ring me? Is it going to be today, tomorrow? How many steps are here? Why does the back button not work? Oh, wait a minute, it's asking me to resubmit the form. What happened there? All that kind of stuff. Progress and feedback. People need to know what they're being asked for, why you need that stuff, you know, what's going to happen next, how long does it take, how do I get back, you know. If you don't have these basics here, you may think it's a bit of a no-brainer to have some of this kind of signposting, but it really should be worked. It has a massive effect, and there are loads of A/B tests that point to this solidly. If you don't work your validation, inline validation with ticks is one of the things that produces most delight that I've ever seen in user tests. And the reason is for this: everybody assumes they're going to get to the end of the form, click the button, and then a sea of red messages will come up and they have to go and fix them all, right? Okay, that's an expectation that's been set by everyone out there, me, you, and the whole world and the internet, designing really, really crappy forms. So go for inline validation, go for smart defaults, auto lookup, auto correction, invisible UX, avoid and stamp out errors at all costs. It'll make money for you. And number 4, too much information for no obvious reason. You're just asking for too many fields, you know. Lead gen forms always benefit from kind of pushing more stuff till later, sometimes. You know, if you're asking for sensitive information in particular, you know, why do we need your phone number? You know, I've put text in there saying, oh, we'll only call you in an emergency if we can't get hold of you, or this is so we can let you know when your package is about to be delivered. I mean, effing tell them, otherwise people will fill in the blanks. And if you don't tell them why you need their phone number, and what's going to happen and when and under which scenario the phone number is going to get used, then they will simply assume that they're going to get pestered by a salesperson all the time. So anyway, in the absence of that information, people will often make up shizzle that isn't actually true, right? So tell people why you need that sensitive information, and with forms, pare it down to just what you need to process this request and this task from the user. Don't try and push it to a whole load of stuff that would be really cool. I've seen some forms fail because they just simply ask for too much data. And if you're going to be calling people back or having a further interaction with them, well, why don't you drip feed it? Why don't you ask them for that data later on? Why don't you put the profile information that you need to set up as part of the post-registration process so that you can get more people signed up and then kind of move them forward to the next step? And one word of caution: if you remove fields that people are expecting and need to feel safe about filling out, so for example, if you were to ask for the credit card number but you didn't ask them what credit card type it was, then people would worry because they were saying, well, wait a minute, where do I tell them it's a Visa? Now, maybe the site has an auto lookup system that tells it a Visa, but somebody needs to tell the user that the system knows that it's a Visa. So in that scenario, the user gets anxious because they're expecting information to be filled out and it isn't there. I've also seen this recently on a test with Michael, where removing a key form actually a key field dropped conversion rate because it was something that people really felt the need to supply that piece of information. So if it's important emotionally for people to give you that stuff so that they feel you've got the right stuff to do the thing for them, then great. Bad copy. Yeah, this is the worst problem in forms by a long stretch. Really poor error messages, rubbish intro copy, horrible buttons, submit, continue, next, non-existent or poor contextual field help, bad labels, bad titles, bad progress bars, no progress bars that are lying and lying and lying about how many steps there are. I mean, Michael and I have seen it all here. Copy is the primary means to help you improve conversion, right? Simple things here: clarity, simplicity, persuasion, comprehension. Okay, talk to people, put some emotion in there, tell them what's going on, give them useful information. The form isn't for you to shout at them. The form is there for you to help them emotionally get to the end of it, right? Work it. The visual hierarchy, the layout, the way that fields are grouped is something that Luke talks a lot about in his book, and it's really important. It helps people understand how much information they're going to fill out, what that information, how it's actually grouped, what types of things therefore are you going to fill out. And every form gives off signals about its complexity and how hard it looks, and unintentionally, because you don't understand these signals, you can easily make a form look far more complicated. The simple act, for example, of making all the field input labels the same size makes the form look like much more work than one that has a random distribution of kind of different lengths, okay? And it may not look as neat in design terms, but there is an affordance, there's a bit of information that is transmitted to the visitor's brain about how complex the form is, that's not to do with how complex the form is, it's how complex it looks visually, okay? And if you don't master that in the visual design of forms, then you're going to put people off, and it's a conversion killer. And if you don't have good analytics data and it's not segmentable, this is another real problem area, because you simply won't be able to optimize, or you will spend time, you'll just be randomly doing it in places where it's not really having much effect overall. And that's the thing, if you want big lifts in your funnel, you need to focus laser-like on the key areas, because they're going to get the needle moving more quickly and with the least amount of effort. It's all about prioritization. You cannot always fix everything. Saying that though, I've often had great results from doing a makeover of a funnel. And when you do a funnel makeover, you don't change the functionality, you just rewrite all the copy, the labels, the error messages, you do a little bit of work on the visual layout. So from a coding point of view, you're not changing anything under the hood, but from a user point of view, you're doing a great deal to solve the problems that you'll have seen in user testing, or things that you suspect may be happening from what you see in analytics or session replay. So it's really important to look at that stuff, and it will help you. Last but not least, if you have a poor cross-device experience, and I don't mean the one on your phone or your boss's phone or on the tablet you have lying around the office, I mean the cross-device experience as experienced by thousands or millions of your customers every day. You've got to get inside that experience, and to do that means you need to know what stuff they have, and then you need to test it, and then you need to think of your site in terms of those devices. Don't think yours, think, oh, we've got to build it for all of those different things, and that's the important way to think. Anyway, I hope that session was useful. I'm going to go off and post this now and get it sent round to everyone. And if you have any questions, or you're interested in getting some training, perhaps some focused workshops that will help your team optimize stuff better. I've been doing a lot of skills transfer work recently where I'm not actually doing the work for the teams. I'm guiding them, mentoring them, and running them through practical hands-on workshops with the kind of problems that they have on their sites to actually teach them how to fish here for their own CRO opportunities. I've also been doing a number of site reviews with Michael recently, so if you like what Michael and I have been talking about in these two sessions, and you would love us to come and have a look at your site and tell you where your top testing areas are and tell you where you need to improve your analytics, then do get in touch with me here by email or hook up with me on LinkedIn, and we can give you all the information you might need there. Thank you very much for listening. Hope it was useful.